The whistle of the late afternoon train echoed across the small frontier station, scattering the sparrows from the telegraph wires and stirring up clouds of dust. Emma Carver stood on the wooden platform, her traveling bag clutched in white-knuckled hands. The bustle of townsfolk ebbed and flowed around her, merchants unloading crates, mothers herding children, cowboys laughing as they strode toward the saloon. Yet no one came for her. Her heart sank with each passing minute. She had answered an ad in the newspaper, sent letters across miles of open prairie, and promised herself a new life with a rancher who said he needed a wife. His words on the page had seemed steady, honest. But now, standing alone at the station with her hope unraveling, she wondered if she had been a fool. The train hissed, steam curling into the air. Soon it would depart, leaving her stranded in a town where she knew no one. She lifted her skirts slightly, ready to climb back aboard, when a small voice stopped her. "Mama?" Emma froze. Turning, she saw a boy no older than 8, his brown eyes wide beneath a shock of sun-bleached hair. He stood a few steps away, clutching a worn straw hat in both hands, staring at her with an expression that pierced her soul. Before she could answer, a tall man in a dust-stained hat rushed forward, breathless from running across the yard. "Ethan!" he barked, though his voice was more startled than angry. He touched the boy's shoulder, then looked up at Emma. Their eyes met, and Emma felt her world shift. "I'm sorry, miss," the man said, his voice deep and rough like gravel. "My boy shouldn't have spoken out of turn." He tipped his hat, revealing storm-gray eyes beneath the brim. "You must be Miss Carver." Emma's throat tightened. "Yes," she whispered. I was beginning to think no one was coming." The man removed his hat fully now, shame softening the hard lines of his face. "Name's Luke Tanner. And I should have been here sooner." He looked down at Ethan, then back at her. "But I reckon my boy already knew who you were before I did." Emma glanced at the child, who still hadn't looked away. Something in his gaze, an ache, a longing, pulled at her heart. Slowly, without thinking, she reached out. Ethan's small hand slipped into hers, and in that moment, all thoughts of leaving vanished. The Tanner Ranch lay a few miles outside town, nestled between golden fields and the jagged rise of distant hills. The ride in Luke's wagon was quiet at first, the creak of the wheels and the rhythmic clop of the horses filling the silence. Ethan sat pressed against Emma's side, his small fingers gripping hers as though afraid she might disappear. Luke stole glances at them, his jaw working as if chewing words he couldn't quite say. Finally, he broke the silence. "I owe you an apology. Wrote you those letters with the best of intentions, but when the day came," he shook his head, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I near lost my nerve." Emma studied him. His shoulders were broad, his hands roughened from years of work, but it was his eyes that held her attention. Gray, shadowed, carrying grief. "You've lost someone," she said softly. He glanced at her, startled by her clarity. Then he nodded once. "My wife. 3 winters passed. Fever took her before we could save her. Ethan's been without a mother ever since." His voice faltered. "I thought maybe bringing you here was selfish, asking another woman to fill shoes too big for anyone." Emma tightened her hold on Ethan's hand. "A child doesn't ask for shoes to be filled. He only asks for love." Luke's grip on the reins eased, and for the first time, he allowed himself a small, grateful smile. Life on the Tanner Ranch was hard but steady. Emma rose early, learned the rhythm of cooking over the wood stove, mending clothes, and tending chickens while Luke worked the cattle and fields. Ethan followed her everywhere, his questions endless, his laughter bubbling like spring water. She discovered joy in teaching him small things. How to knead bread, how to read words in the Bible, how to see shapes in the clouds that drifted across the wide prairie sky. But at night, when Ethan was asleep, Emma often sat on the porch staring into the darkness, wondering if she truly belonged. She had come west seeking a husband, not knowing if she could truly earn the love of a child, or the trust of a man who still carried sorrow like a shadow. One evening, Luke joined her. The crickets hummed in the tall grass, and the air smelled of rain. He leaned on the porch railing, silent for a long while. Then he spoke. "Ethan called you Mama at the station," he said quietly. "He hasn't used that word in a long time." Emma's heart fluttered. Do you want me to correct him? Luke turned his head, his gray eyes searching hers. No. I reckon, maybe he was right. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Emma looked away, blinking back tears. I'm not here to replace her, Luke. I couldn't. But I can care for him. And I can care for you if you'll let me. Silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of the wind. Then Luke stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers on the railing. I don't need a replacement, Emma. I need someone who'll walk beside me. Someone who'll love him and maybe love me too. Emma met his gaze, her chest aching with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. She didn't answer with words, only with the way she laid her hand in his, letting the silence speak what her heart already knew. As spring rolled into summer, the ranch came alive with color and sound. Wildflowers dotted the fields, calves were born strong and healthy, and laughter echoed more often than sorrow within the Tanner home. Emma no longer doubted her place there. She was Ethan's mama now, not by birth but by choice, and Luke's steady glances told her his heart had begun to heal. One Sunday morning after church, Ethan tugged on Emma's hand as they walked back to the wagon. Mama, he said proudly, loud enough for the townsfolk to hear, Papa says we're gonna be a family forever. Emma's cheeks flushed, but Luke only tipped his hat and grinned. That's right, son. Forever. The word wrapped around her like a promise, stronger than the wide sky above, deeper than the prairie roots beneath her feet. For the first time in her life, Emma knew she wasn't just surviving. She was home. And it had all begun with a boy's hand reaching for hers, and a single word whispered at the station, Mama. Summer gave way to autumn, and the land turned gold beneath the harvest sun. The fields around the Tanner ranch swayed with tall grass, and the air smelled of cut hay and wood smoke. Emma found herself smiling more easily now, her laughter ringing through the house as naturally as if it had always belonged there. One evening, after supper, Ethan asked her to sit by the fire while he carefully placed a drawing in her lap. Crayons had been pressed hard against the paper, 3 figures standing side by side beneath a bright yellow sun. One was tall with a wide-brimmed hat, the other wore a dress, and between them stood a boy with a smile stretching across his face. That's us, Ethan said proudly. My family. Emma pressed the paper to her chest, her eyes misting over. She looked at Luke, who was leaning in the doorway, watching them with quiet pride. His gaze held hers, and in that moment, no words were needed. Later that night, when Ethan had gone to bed, Luke took Emma's hand and led her outside. The sky was a blanket of stars, stretching endless above the dark horizon. The cicadas hummed, and the air carried the crisp edge of the coming frost.